Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor S.P. Singh from Faculty of Management Studies, Gurukul Kangdi University, Haridwar. Today we are going to study Module 21 on an introduction to qualitative research. After reading this module, you should be able to understand essential features of qualitative research, comprehend the starting point of qualitative research, know the brief history of qualitative research, understand the qualitative research in modern times, and understand the pros and cons of qualitative research. The interest in qualitative research has been increasing very much in the last few decades. Qualitative research is of particular relevance to the study of social relations due to the facts of pluralization of life worlds, including new obscurity, individual ways of living, and patterns relating to biography. The dissolution of old social inequalities into the new diversity of milieus, subcultures, lifestyles, and ways of living. The pluralization needs a new sensitivity to the empirical study of issues. The period of big narratives and theories has ended. Locally, temporally, and situationally limited narratives are now getting relevance. Social researchers with new social contexts and perspectives are increasingly confronted with rapid social change and the resulting diversification of life worlds. Features of qualitative research: suitability of methods and theories, perspectives of the participant and their diversity, reflexivity of the researcher and the research, variety of approaches and methods in qualitative research. Scientific disciplines used defined methodological standards to distinguish themselves from other disciplines. In this process of creating as a scientific area, the methods receive the point of reference for examining the suitability of ideas and issues for empirical investigations. Sometimes a clear identification and separation of variables is not feasible, so that they cannot be designed in an experimental format. Finally, designing methods prone to the complexity of a study subject is also a method to study complex issues with qualitative research. Here, the object under study is the determining criteria for selecting a method. Objects are not reduced to single variables, but represented in their entirety in their everyday context. Therefore, the disciplines of study are not situations artificial in the laboratory, but the real practices and interactions of the subjects in common life. The goal of research becomes less to test what is already known, but to identify and develop the new and to create empirically grounded theories. Perspectives of the participants and their diversity. Qualitative research on a specific topic concentrates on various questions and demonstrates the variety of perspectives of different persons on the objects and starts from the subjective and social meanings attached to it. Qualitative researchers undertake study of participants' knowledge and practices and make an analysis of interactions and manners of dealing with issues in a specific field. They describe interrelations in the context of the case and explain in relation to it. Qualitative research considers that in the field, viewpoints and practices are different due to the different subjective perspectives and social background connected to them. Reflexivity of the researcher and the research. Different from qualitative research, qualitative methods obtain the researcher's communication with the field and its participants as an explicit portion of knowledge in place of thinking it as an interviewing object. The subjectivity of the researcher and of subjects of the study acquires the place in the research process. Researchers' reflections on their actions and observations of the participants, their impressions, irritations, feelings, and so on become data, forming part of the interpretation and documents in research diaries or context protocols. Variety of approaches and methods in qualitative research. A unified theoretical and methodological concept is the basis of a qualitative research. Numerous theoretical approaches and their methods characterize the discussions and the research practice. Subjective viewpoints, a string of research studies reconstructing the structures of the social field and the latent meaning of practices are such characteristics. This various approaches result from different developmental ways in the evolution of qualitative research, which developed partially in parallel and partially in sequence. Starting point of qualitative research. The limitations of the quantitative approaches have always been taken as a starting point to forward reasons for use of qualitative research. In a traditional way, psychology and social sciences have considered the natural sciences and their exactness as a model, paying particular attention to developing quantitative and standardized methods. Guiding principle of research and of planning research have been used for clearly isolating causes and effects, properly operationalize theoretical relations, to measure and to quantify phenomena, to develop research designs permitting the generalization of research findings, and to draw general laws. For example, random samples of populations are selected in order to conduct a survey which is representative of that population. General statements are made independently to the extent possible about the concrete cases that have been studied. Observed phenomena are categorized based on their frequency and distribution. For the purpose of classification, causal relations and their validity very clearly. The conditions under which the phenomena and relations under study occur are controlled to the extent possible. Studies are designed in such a way that the researcher's influence can be excluded as far as possible. Procedures to construct a questionnaire, design an experiment, and to statistically analyze data have become increasingly refined. It is evident that social science results are rarely seen and applied in everyday life. To satisfy methodological standards, their investigations and findings often are too far away from day-to-day questions and problems. On the other side, analysis of research practice show that the ideals of objectivity methodologists formulate can merely be fulfilled partially for conducting a concrete research. In spite of all the controls of methodology, influences from interests, social and cultural background are not easy to avoid in research and its results. These factors influence the design of research questions, related hypotheses, and the interpretation of data and the relations therein. Lastly, the disenchantment has consequences for the kind of knowledge the social sciences or psychology can attempt for. To formulate such subject and situation related statements which are empirically well founded is a goal which can be attained with qualitative research. Evolution of qualitative research. Psychology and social sciences in general have a long tradition of using qualitative research. In psychology, Wundt used methods of description. At the same time, an argument between a more monographic conception of science, which was oriented towards induction and case studies, and an empirical and statistical approach began in German psychology. In American sociology, biographical methods, case studies, and descriptive methods were central for a long time. This can be demonstrated by the importance of Thomas and Nanake's study. The Polish peasant in Europe and America, and more generally with the influence of the Chicago School in sociology. During the further establishment of two sciences, however, increasingly difficult, hard experimental standards and quantifying approaches have established themselves against soft understanding, open and qualitative descriptive strategies. It was not until the 1960s that an American sociology, the critic of standardized quantifying social research, became relevant again. This critique was taken up in the 1970s in German conversations. Finally, this directed to a renaissance of qualitative research in the social sciences and particularly in psychology. In United States and in Germany, the development and discussions not only occurred at different times but also in different phases. Differences between qualitative and quantitative research. There are several differences between qualitative and quantitative research. Some of the important differences are discussed here. Qualitative research tends to focus on how people or groups of people can have somewhat different ways of looking at reality, usually social or psychological reality. Quantitative research tends to focus on ways of describing and understanding reality by the discovery of general laws. Qualitative research takes account of complexity by incorporating the real world context, while qualitative research takes account of complexity by incorporating the real world context can take different perspectives on board. Quantitative research takes account of complexity by precise definition of the focus of interest and techniques that mean that external noise can be discounted. Qualitative research studies behavior in natural settings or uses people's accounts as data, usually no manipulation of variables. Quantitative research involves manipulation of some variables, independent variables, while other variables which would be considered to be extraneous and confounding variables are held constant. Qualitative research focuses on reports of experience or on data which cannot be adequately expressed numerically. The quantitative research uses statistical techniques that allow us to talk about how likely it is that something is true for a given population in an objective or measurable sense. Qualitative research focuses on description and interpretation and might lead to development of new concepts or theory or to an evaluation of an organizational process. Quantitative research focuses on cause and effect, that is, uses experiment to test an hypothesis. Qualitative research employs a flexible, emergent but systematic research process. Quantitative research requires the research process to be defined in advance. The pros and cons of qualitative research. Pros of qualitative research. The qualitative research can examine issues in detail and in more depth. The interviews are not restricted to specific questions. Researcher can redirect them in real time. There can be immediate revision of framework and direction as fresh information is received. The qualitative data obtained about human experience is comparatively more powerful and arousing strong interest than quantitative data. Since usually data are obtained from a few individuals, it is difficult to generalize the findings on a wider scale. Cons of qualitative research. The individual skills of the researcher determines the research quality, and personal biases, the researcher's individual biases and the behavior peculiar to persons more easily influence it. It is time consuming to analyze and interpret the large amount of data. The qualitative research is not so well accepted and understood as quantitative research is. Demerits of qualitative research. Often the researcher is present during the data collection. This is likely to affect the responses of the subjects under study. At the time of presenting findings, the issues of incognito and secrecy can come up. The visual presentation of the findings can be more cumbersome and time consuming. Friends, in this module you have studied the essential features, the starting point, the brief history of qualitative research as well as the qualitative research in modern times and pros and cons of qualitative research. Thanks for visiting EPG Pathshala.